You think you know what rock bottom looks like? Try sitting at your wife's family dinner table while they debate whether you're worth the chair you're sitting in. For 10 years, I swallowed their insults and smiled through their condescension. But when my wife gave me that ultimatum at their Lake Tahoe reunion, she never expected I'd choose the nuclear option. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting mad. It's disappearing completely and building something they could never destroy. This is how I turned their worst nightmare into my greatest victory. My name is Shane Cooper. I'm 41 years old, and 3 months ago, I thought I had a decent life. I run Cooper's Driving Academy in Denver. Been teaching folks how to handle the road for 15 years. Started with just me and a beat-up Honda Civic. Now I've got 4 instructors and 6 vehicles. It's honest work that pays the bills and keeps people safe. My wife Cassandra is 38, comes from old Colorado money. The Barrett family made their fortune in mining and real estate before Colorado was even a state. When we met 10 years ago at a friend's barbecue, I was teaching her cousin to parallel park. She laughed at my jokes, didn't care that my truck was older than some students. For a while, I thought love could conquer all. The wedding was beautiful, held at their Aspen estate with white linens and mountain views. Her mother Victoria smiled through gritted teeth during my vows. Her father Harrison shook my hand like he was touching something unpleasant. But Cassandra looked radiant, and I convinced myself that's all that mattered. We tried for kids immediately. Both wanted them, seemed natural. But month after month, nothing happened. Doctors ran tests and delivered devastating news. Medical complications meant children weren't possible. That diagnosis changed Cassandra, made her quieter, distant. It gave her family another reason to see me as a failure. Barrett family gatherings became endurance tests. Every holiday was another chance for them to remind me I wasn't enough. Victoria would ask about business with that tone, suggesting she knew the answer wouldn't impress. Harrison would nod politely when I mentioned expansion plans, then immediately change subjects to someone more successful. Her brother Jonathan worked in finance, constantly mentioning bonuses and European vacations. I tried keeping up, bought nicer clothes, newer truck, looked into franchising that would have doubled my debt just to have something bigger to discuss. Never enough. The gap between my middle-class reality and their country club lifestyle felt like a widening canyon. Worst part wasn't the money. It was watching Cassandra slip away from me toward them. She started correcting my grammar at parties, apologizing for me when I used wrong forks, stopped laughing at my jokes. Those looks that said I embarrassed her just by being myself. But I loved her, or who she used to be. So I kept showing up, kept trying to fit their world, pretending tolerance equaled acceptance. The annual Barrett reunion at Lake Tahoe was supposed to be different this year. Cassandra promised it would be smaller, relaxed, just close family. She begged me to come, said it was important. I should have stayed home. The drive to Lake Tahoe should have been beautiful. For hours through mountain passes with Cassandra beside me, classic rock on the radio, and the promise of a relaxing weekend ahead. Instead, it felt like driving to my own execution. Cassandra spent most of the trip on her phone, coordinating with her mother about seating arrangements and meal plans. Every few miles, she'd glance at me with that expression I'd learned to dread, the one that said she was already bracing for me to embarrass her somehow. "Remember, Shane," she said as we climbed into the mountains, "Uncle Theodore will be there this year. He just retired from his law firm, so maybe steer the conversation away from work." I gripped the steering wheel tighter. Why? Afraid I might mention that I actually enjoy what I do. "That's not what I meant," Cassandra replied, but her tone suggested it was exactly what she meant. "It's just that some people have different perspectives on success." Translation: don't remind everyone that your husband teaches teenagers how to use turn signals while Uncle Theodore owns half of downtown Denver. The Barrett family cabin came into view as we rounded the final curve. Calling a cabin was like calling the Titanic a boat. The sprawling log structure sat on a private stretch of shoreline, complete with a boat dock, guest houses, and enough square footage to house a small village. 3 generations of Barrett wealth gleaming in the afternoon sun. Cars were already lined up in the circular drive. BMWs, Mercedes, a couple of Audis, and one Bentley that probably cost more than my entire business. I parked my truck between a Lexus and a Range Rover, feeling like a mutt at a dog show. "Shane, please," Cassandra said as I killed the engine. "Just try to fit in this weekend. For me." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the woman I'd fallen in love with buried somewhere under 10 years of her family's influence. I've been trying to fit in for a decade, Cass. When does it become enough? She didn't answer, just grabbed her purse and stepped out of the truck. Victoria Barrett emerged from the front door like she owned the mountain itself, which, knowing the family's real estate holdings, she probably did. She was dressed in what I'd learned to recognize as casual wealth, clothes that looked simple but cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. "Cassandra, darling," Victoria called out, arms extended for the kind of air-kiss greeting that never failed to make me feel like an outsider. "And Shane," she added, her smile cooling several degrees. "How nice that you could make it." The way she said, "you could make it," suggested she'd been hoping I wouldn't. Harrison Barrett appeared next, wearing khakis and a polo shirt that probably had some designer's name stitched discreetly somewhere. He gave me the same limp handshake he'd been offering for 10 years. "Shane, good to see you," Harrison said with all the enthusiasm of a man greeting his proctologist. "How's the driving instruction business?" Even the way he said it made my profession sound like a hobby I'd picked up to pass time. "Keeping busy," I replied. "I actually just landed a contract with the county to train their new municipal drivers." Victoria's eyebrows raised slightly. "How civic-minded of you." Before I could respond, Jonathan appeared with his wife Patricia and their twin boys. Jonathan worked in finance and never let anyone forget it. He looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine ad for expensive watches. "Shane," Jonathan boomed, slapping my back harder than necessary. "Still teaching people not to hit things with their cars." The twins snickered, and I forced a smile. The first evening at the lake house set the tone for what I knew would be a long weekend. Dinner was served on the massive deck overlooking the water, with enough courses to feed a small army and enough wine to float a boat. I found myself seated between Cassandra's cousin Michelle, a real estate attorney, and her great-uncle Theodore, the recently retired law firm partner. The conversation flowed around me like I was a rock in a stream, acknowledged but ultimately irrelevant. "Theodore, you simply must tell everyone about your retirement plans," Victoria announced from the head of the table. "I heard you're considering buying that vineyard in Napa." Theodore beamed with the satisfaction of a man whose biggest decision was which luxury to pursue next. "Well, I've always been passionate about wine, and at my age, why not turn a hobby into an investment?" Michelle leaned forward eagerly. "That's brilliant, Uncle Ted. Location, 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 even in retirement." I took a sip of my beer, apparently the only person at the table who hadn't graduated to wine, and tried to contribute. "That sounds like a smart move. I've been thinking about expanding my driving school into defensive driving courses for corporate clients." The table went quiet for just a moment too long. Victoria's smile became even more fixed. "How practical," she said, managing to make the word sound like an insult. Harrison cleared his throat. "Speaking of expansion, Jonathan, how's that merger going of the firm?" And, just like that, the conversation moved past me like I'd never spoken. Jonathan launched into a detailed explanation of some financial deal that involved more money than I'd see in 5 lifetimes. I caught Cassandra's eye across the table. She was staring into her wine glass, her jaw set in that way that meant she was embarrassed. Not embarrassed for me, embarrassed by me. "Shane," Theodore said suddenly, turning to me with the kind of forced interest you show a child. "Cassandra mentioned you've been in the driving instruction business for quite some time. Do you ever think about transitioning to something more substantial?" The question hit like a slap. More substantial, as if teaching people life-saving skills was somehow less important than shuffling money around in boardrooms. "I find my work pretty substantial," I replied, keeping my voice level. "Last month alone, I helped prevent 3 potential accidents by teaching proper defensive techniques to new drivers." Theodore nodded with patronizing approval. Of course. Community service is admirable, but surely a man your age has bigger ambitions." Michelle jumped in with a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "Oh, Uncle Ted, not everyone can own vineyards. Some people are perfectly content with simpler goals." The word simpler hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. I felt something shift inside me, a tightening in my chest that had nothing to do with the mountain altitude. These people weren't just dismissing my work. They were dismissing me as a human being. "You know what's simple?" I said, my voice carrying farther than I'd intended. Simple as thinking that money equals worth. The entire table fell silent. The silence stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Every face around the table stared at me, with expressions ranging from shock to barely concealed disgust. I'd crossed some invisible line that separated their world from mine, and there was no going back. Victoria was the first to recover, her smile returning with Arctic precision. "Well," she said, her voice carrying the chill of a mountain wind, "I suppose we all have different perspectives on what constitutes achievement." Harrison cleared his throat loudly. "Perhaps we should focus on more pleasant topics. How about those Broncos this season?" But I wasn't finished. 10 years of swallowed pride and bitten tongues had built up a pressure that was finally finding release. "You want to know what achievement looks like? It's the 16-year-old kid I taught last month who didn't plow into a tree because I showed him how to handle a skid. It's the grandmother I helped get her license back after her husband died because I gave her confidence behind the wheel." Theodore set down his wine glass with deliberate care. "Shane, perhaps you're getting a bit emotional." "Emotional?" I stood up, my chair scraping against the deck. "No, Theodore, I'm getting honest. For the first time in a decade, I'm being completely honest." Cassandra's face had gone pale. "Shane, please sit down," she whispered. "Why?" I asked, looking directly at her. "So your family can continue pretending I don't exist? So they can keep making jokes about my simple life while they sip wine that costs more than most people make in a week?" Jonathan leaned back in his chair, smirking. "Nobody's making jokes, Shane. We're just having a conversation." "A conversation," I repeated. "Right. The kind where you talk around me instead of to me. Where you dismiss everything I've built as if it doesn't matter." Michelle laughed nervously. "Come on, Shane. We're all family here." "No." I cut her off. "We're not family. Family supports each other. Family shows respect. You people tolerate me like I'm some charity case Cassandra picked up." The sound of my own voice surprised me. It was steady, controlled, but carrying an edge that cut through their polite facade like a blade through silk. Victoria's composure finally slipped. "How dare you speak to us this way in our own home? After everything we've done to include you." "Include me?" I laughed. It wasn't a pleasant sound. When have you ever included me in anything that mattered? When have you ever asked my opinion about something other than whether I thought the weather was nice?" Harrison stood up, his politician's instincts kicking in. "I think everyone needs to calm down and—" "I'm calm," I said, and I realized I was. For the first time in years, I felt completely, utterly calm. I'm calm because I finally understand something I should have figured out a long time ago. I looked around the table at their faces, shocked, angry, embarrassed, and then settled my gaze on Cassandra. She was staring at me like I turned into a stranger. "I understand that no matter what I do, no matter how hard I try, I'll never be good enough for you people. And you know what? I'm tired of trying." The mountain air felt crisp against my face as I turned and walked away from the table, leaving behind a silence that spoke louder than any words they could have thrown at me. I made it to our guest room before Cassandra caught up with me. The sound of her heels clicking on the hardwood echoed through the hallway like countdown timer. When the door slammed behind us, I knew we were about to have the conversation I'd been avoiding for years. "What the hell was that, Shane?" Cassandra's voice was shaking with rage and embarrassment. "You completely humiliated me down there." I turned to face her, feeling strangely calm despite the storm brewing in her eyes. "I humiliated you? By standing up for myself? By refusing to let your family treat me like garbage?" "They weren't treating you like garbage," she shot back. "They were trying to include you in conversation, and you turned it into some kind of personal attack." I laughed, short and bitter. "Include me? Cassandra, your uncle literally asked if I had any bigger ambitions. Your cousin called my goals simple. How is that inclusion?" "You're being too sensitive," she said, crossing her arms defensively. "That's just how they talk. You know they don't mean anything by it." "That's the problem," I said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "You know they mean every word, but you'd rather blame me for being upset than defend your own husband." Her face flushed red. "I shouldn't have to defend you. You should be able to handle a simple dinner conversation without causing a scene." "A scene?" I stood up, feeling that calm certainty settle deeper into my bones. I told them the truth about their behavior. If that's a scene, then maybe the problem isn't me. The problem is that you can't accept that not everyone lives your blue-collar lifestyle. The words came out like she'd been holding them back for years. Some people have achieved more than running a driving school. There it was. The truth she'd been dancing around for a decade, finally out in the open. Achieved more. I repeated slowly. Is that what you think? That your family's wealth makes them better people than me? I think, she said, her voice dropping to that cold tone I'd learned to fear, that you need to decide what's more important, your pride or our marriage. The room went silent except for the sound of my own heartbeat. You have two options, Shane, she continued, her words cutting like broken glass. Apologize to my family, or leave. I stared at her for a long moment, seeing clearly for the first time in years. This wasn't about one dinner or one argument. This was about 10 years of choosing them over me, of being ashamed of who I was, of wanting me to be someone else. Okay, I said quietly. She blinked, clearly expecting more of a fight. Okay, what? Okay, I'll leave. Her face went pale. Shane, that's not what But I was already moving, pulling my duffel bag from the closet. Packing took less than 10 minutes. Funny how little you actually need when you strip away all the pretense. Clean clothes, toiletries, my wallet, and the watch my father gave me before he died. Everything that really mattered fit in one bag. Cassandra stood frozen by the window, watching me move around the room like she couldn't quite believe what was happening. Shane, wait, she said as I zipped the bag closed. I didn't mean you had to leave tonight. We could talk about this in the morning when everyone's calmed down. I slung the bag over my shoulder and looked at her. Really looked at her. Somewhere along the way, the woman I'd fallen in love with had been replaced by this stranger who cared more about her family's approval than her husband's dignity. There's nothing to talk about, Cass. You made your choice 10 years ago. You just finally said it out loud. That's not fair, she whispered. Fair? I headed for the door. What's not fair is spending a decade trying to turn me into someone I'm not. What's not fair is giving me an ultimatum instead of standing by my side. I paused at the door, my hand on the handle. You wanted me to choose between my pride and our marriage. But here's the thing. A real marriage wouldn't make me choose. The hallway was empty. The rest of the family probably still downstairs discussing what an embarrassment I'd been. I made it to my truck without seeing anyone, threw my bag in the back, and started the engine. As I drove away from the lake house, my phone started buzzing. Text after text from Cassandra, then calls I didn't answer. By the time I reached the highway, I made my decision. I pulled into a 24-hour diner and ordered coffee, then opened my laptop. One quick search showed me a red-eye flight from Denver to Portland, leaving in 3 hours. One-way ticket, $347. I'd never been to Oregon, but it was far from Colorado, far from Lake Tahoe, far from the Barrett family and their world of casual cruelty. That was enough for now. The waitress refilled my coffee and asked if I needed anything else. Actually, I said, pulling out my credit card, can I use your Wi-Fi to buy a plane ticket? She smiled. Running away or running toward something? I thought about it for a moment. Both. 3 hours later, I was 30,000 feet above Colorado, watching the lights of my old life disappear below. I'd chosen option 3, the one Cassandra never saw coming. By the time they realized I was gone, it would be too late to stop me. The plane touched down in Portland at sunrise, and I felt like I was landing on a different planet. The air smelled of rain and pine instead of mountain snow and family expectations. I rented a beat-up Honda from the airport, cheapest thing they had, and drove west toward the ocean without any real plan except getting as far from Colorado as possible. My phone had been buzzing nonstop since takeoff. Missed calls from Cassandra, texts that started apologetic and gradually turned angry. A few voicemails from her mother that I deleted without listening to. One message from Jonathan that just said, "You're making a huge mistake." I turned the phone off and tossed it in the glove box. The Oregon coast hit me like a physical force. Miles of rugged shoreline with waves that seemed to wash away everything behind them. I found a small town called Cannon Beach and parked near the water, just sitting there watching the Pacific roll in and out with hypnotic rhythm. For the first time in years, I could breathe without measuring each breath against someone else's expectations. I found a cheap motel called the Seahorse Inn. Nothing fancy, just clean rooms and an owner who didn't ask questions. The manager, a guy named Pete with weathered hands and kind eyes, handed me keys to a room overlooking the water. First time in Oregon, Pete asked, noting my Colorado license. First time anywhere, really, I said, looking for something different. Pete nodded like he understood. Ocean's got a way of washing things clean. Take your time figuring it out. That afternoon, I walked the beach and started making mental lists. I had savings, enough to last 6 months if I was careful. My driving instructor certification was valid nationwide, so I could work anywhere. Most importantly, I had skills people needed regardless of their zip code. I stopped at a local diner for dinner and overheard the waitress mentioning that her teenage son needed driving lessons. When she brought my check, I introduced myself and offered my services. Within an hour, I had my first Oregon client. "You move fast," she said, laughing. 10 years of moving slow taught me the value of momentum, I replied. By evening, I'd made a decision. This wasn't just running away anymore. This was running towards something. I pulled out a notebook and started sketching plans for Cooper Driving Academy West Coast. If I was starting over, I might as well do it right. The sound of waves outside my window was better than any lullaby I'd ever heard. 3 weeks into my Oregon adventure, I realized I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. The coast had a rhythm that matched something deep inside me, something I'd forgotten existed during my years of trying to fit into the Barrett mold. I'd found a small office space in Cannon Beach's main strip, nothing fancy, but perfect for a one-man operation. The landlord, a retired fisherman named Carl, appreciated that I paid first and last month's rent in cash without trying to negotiate. "You strike me as a straight shooter," Carl said, shaking my hand. "That's rare these days." Word spread fast in a small town. Within 2 weeks, I had 12 students ranging from nervous teenagers to senior citizens who'd lost confidence behind the wheel. Each success felt like rebuilding something the Barrett family had tried to tear down. My phone stayed off most of the time now. When I finally checked it, there were dozens of messages from Cassandra, ranging from angry demands to desperate apologies. Her family had apparently mobilized their network of lawyers and private investigators to track me down. Victoria had even called the Colorado State Patrol, claiming I'd stolen the truck. I deleted everything without reading past the first few lines. The breakthrough came when I helped an elderly woman named Dorothy pass her road test after 3 previous failures with other instructors. She'd been too intimidated to drive since her husband's death, but needed independence to visit her grandchildren. "You gave me my life back," she said, tears in her eyes as she received her license. That's when I understood what I'd been missing in Colorado. Respect isn't something you demand or inherit. It's something you earn by improving other people's lives. I started expanding, putting flyers in local businesses, and partnering with the high school for driver's education classes. The response exceeded my expectations. People here valued practical skills over prestigious connections. One evening, while updating my business plan on my laptop, I got a knock on my motel room door. For a moment, my heart stopped. Had they found me? But it was just P from the front desk. "Shane, there's a lady from the Driving School Association here to see you," he said. "Says she heard about your work and wants to discuss a partnership." I looked out at the ocean, waves rolling and steady and sure, and smiled. This was what building something felt like when you weren't constantly looking over your shoulder for approval. "Tell her I'll be right there," I said. For the first time in a decade, I was excited about tomorrow. 6 months after arriving in Oregon, my new life had taken solid shape. Cooper Driving Academy had 15 regular students, partnerships with 2 local high schools, and a waiting list that stretched into next month. The Oregon coast had given me something I'd forgotten existed, peace that didn't require anyone else's permission. Then Cassandra showed up. I was finishing a lesson with elderly Mr. Peterson when I saw the rental car parked outside my office. Colorado plates. My stomach dropped before my brain caught up. Through the window, I could see her silhouette, still perfectly put together, still radiating that Barrett family authority. "Shane," Mr. Peterson said, noticing my distraction. "Everything all right?" "Just an unexpected visitor," I said, helping him out of the driver's seat. "You did great today. We'll work on highway merging next week." Cassandra stepped out of the car as Mr. Peterson walked away. She looked exactly the same. Designer clothes, perfect hair, that expression that suggested she was slumming it by being here. The Oregon coast's honest weather had no effect on her artificial polish. "Hello, Shane," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Cassandra." I kept my distance, keys jingling in my hand. "Long way from Lake Tahoe. We need to talk." She gestured toward my office. "Can we go inside?" I considered refusing, but curiosity won out. Inside, she looked around my simple workspace like she was touring a museum exhibit, mildly interested but ultimately dismissive. "This is what you left me for?" she asked, settling into the client chair across from my desk. "Teaching people to parallel park in some fishing village." "I left you for self-respect," I said, remaining standing. "The location is just geography." She flinched slightly. "Shane, I've come to ask you to come home. We can work this out." "Work what out exactly?" I leaned against the wall, crossing my arms. "Your family's contempt for everything I am? Your embarrassment about my existence?" "That's not fair," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "My family, they're difficult, I know that. But we could find a way to make it work." I looked at her for a long moment, this woman I'd spent 10 years trying to please. "Cassandra, do you even know what I do here?" "Really do." She gestured vaguely. "You teach driving. I help people gain independence. Last week, I helped a 16-year-old girl pass her test so she could drive her diabetic mother to medical appointments. Yesterday, I taught a veteran with PTSD how to feel safe behind the wheel again. That's not just teaching driving. That's changing lives." Her expression shifted, confusion mixing with something that might have been recognition. "The problem was never your family's money," I continued. "It was that none of you could see value in anything that didn't come with a price tag or a pedigree, including me." "Shane, please," she whispered. "I miss you. You miss the idea of me," I said gently. "The version that smiled and stayed quiet while your family used me as entertainment. That man doesn't exist anymore." Cassandra left Oregon the next morning without another word. I watched her rental car disappear down Highway 101 and felt nothing but relief. That chapter of my life was finally, completely closed. 1 year later, I stood in my expanded office space, watching the Pacific waves roll in with their eternal rhythm. Cooper Driving Academy had grown beyond my wildest expectations. 12 instructors now work for me across 3 coastal towns. We'd save enough lives through proper training that the state had asked me to develop their new defensive driving curriculum. The divorce had been finalized 6 months ago. Cassandra kept the condo, the investments, everything that mattered to her family. I kept my truck, my tools, and my dignity. Best trade I ever made. My phone buzzed. A text from Dorothy, the elderly woman whose confidence I'd restored. Her granddaughter was turning 16 and wanted driving lessons. "Only from you," Dorothy wrote. "She says you're the guy who gave Grandma her wings back." That's what success looked like now. Not stock portfolios or country club memberships, but real impact on real lives. Pete knocked on my office door, grinning. "Shane, you gotta see this." Outside, a news van was parked near the beach. A reporter was interviewing Sarah, one of my first students, about our veterans driving program. The story would air statewide, bringing more attention to our work helping soldiers readjust to civilian driving. "You're getting famous," Pete laughed. "Good," I said. "More people will get the help they need." That evening, I walked the beach with my dog Rex, a golden retriever I'd adopted 3 months ago. He bounded through the waves while I thought about the strange turns life takes. The Barrett family had tried to make me smaller, to fit their narrow definition of worth. Oregon had let me become exactly who I was meant to be. My phone rang, my sister calling from Colorado. "Shane, I saw the news story online," she said, excitement bubbling in her voice. "You look so happy." "I'm happy," I said, watching Rex chase seagulls. "Really, truly happy." "Any regrets about leaving?" I thought about it for a moment, watching the sun set over the Pacific. Somewhere back in Colorado, the Barrett family was probably gathering for another dinner of passive-aggressive comments and inherited superiority. Meanwhile, I was building something real with my own hands. "Only one," I said finally. "I regret waiting so long to do it." The waves kept rolling in, patient and persistent, washing away the past and bringing in tomorrow. I found my shore, and nothing could pull me back into waters that had nearly drowned me. Some people inherit their worth. Others build it wave by wave, lesson by lesson, life by life. I'd chosen to build.